welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. I'm Amma Mama, and first off, I apologize because this video is coming out a little bit late. So if you're used to it being out on Sunday, or you even noticed that it's normally out on Sunday, we just had a lot of stuff going on this weekend. I didn't get a chance to get everything done, and so it is going to be up today instead, Monday. I wanted to do my April wrap up, and it shouldn't be too long because I didn't have a ton of books on my April TBR, and I did manage to finish reading all of them. The last one that I was reading was The Talisman by Stephen King, and technically I finished it on, I think, like May 2nd or 3rd, but it was in that week, and I did start it, at the end of April. So that works for me. That counts in my mind. So I'll go through each of these books, kind of give you a wrap up for the month. The first one I'll talk about is Needful Things by Stephen King. And this one, I did enjoy it. It was pretty good. I wouldn't recommend it as highly as I recommend some of his other books. And part of that for me, as I mentioned in another video, was really just because of the gore. But I liked the story itself. So basically, a man, I think it's Leland Gaunt, I think is his name. He opens up a store in Castle Rock, Maine. And this store, basically, he will sell people what they want or need, always at a bargain price. But there's a catch to it. And so I don't want to say a whole lot to that point, because it really does, that's what carries the story, and that's what, I don't know, that's what kind of brings it to life. And so if I say a whole lot about that, it ruins some of the plot point for it. There was, like I said, there was a lot of gore in this, especially towards the end. And so while it was interesting, I did listen to this one on audiobook, which I think helped a lot because I was able to do other things while I was listening to it instead of just reading it. And so I think that helped me get through like those gory parts a lot easier. I really enjoyed the ending a lot, so it made it worth it to me to get through all of that. But because of the amount of gore, to it, I didn't rate this as high as what I tend to with Stephen King books, but I did really enjoy it. So I would still recommend it, just with that caveat that if you have a problem with a lot of like blood, gory kind of stuff, it might be a little rough. But you could still, again, the same as like when I was listening to it, I was able to do other things. I feel like if I had been reading it, I probably would have skimmed over those parts, because to me, I understand why they were in there, but I just didn't need that much detail. So I feel like I could have skipped it and still enjoyed the story. So that would be my only caveat with this one, but I did enjoy it. I also read Hell House and Other True Hauntings from Around the World by Alison Rattle and Allison Vale. And this was fine. I mean, I would recommend it if you're interested at all in, just about hauntings around the world, or haunted places, or, ghosts and things like that. It was definitely interesting. It covered, it's got some cool pictures throughout it, but it did cover different continents and some of the hauntings. North America, the Caribbean, South America, Europe, Australia, Africa, and Asia. So it was fine. It's not a fictional book. Well, depending on your views of, things of the occult and hauntings, but it's not a fictional book in the sense of it being like a story or anything like that. So it was fine. I would kind of recommend it. It was a quick read. It wasn't anything I sat down and just, read cover to cover, over a period of time. I just read a couple stories out of it every day during the month while I was doing my other reading. The next book I'll talk about a little bit is The Practice House, and I'll put the cover up. I don't remember off the top of my head who Laura McSomething, I think. I don't remember the name of the person who wrote it. But basically that book, it was on my Kindle, and I also got the Audible version of it so I could listen to it, because as you may know, if you watch my channel at all for a while, I'm not real big on reading on my devices. And so I prefer to listen to them when I can for those books that I have on my phone. But The Practice House, it's a historical fiction book, and it was set, early 1900s, I think, if I remember correctly. I might be a little bit off, or late 1800s, because there were cars in it, but they weren't, I don't think they were as common as, some people still were driving buggies with a mule. But basically a girl and her sister, they're from Scotland, and they moved to the United States. I won't really explain why or how they came to the United States, because again, I don't want to spoil the story, but they come to the United States, and then one of the sisters goes to Kansas to be a school teacher there. She answered an ad that was put in the paper in New York where they are. And so she goes to be a school teacher. And the story is just about her life there, and some of the challenges, and the family that she's living with, and what happens while she's there. And there is a lot of stuff. I really enjoyed this story a lot, so I would recommend it. I don't know if it's something that I would have normally just picked up. And I think I'd mentioned I have a lot of books on my Kindle app, or through my Kindle, that I don't necessarily remember when or why I got them, if they were older books, and this was one of those. So I don't know if it was like free at some point and I got it, because I didn't remember getting it or anything. And again, I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but it was really enjoyable. And I don't know if some of that was being able to listen to the Audible version of it, so hearing the story versus just reading it, but it carried along well, I thought. And it definitely had some twists in there that surprised me. And the way the author would write, you would get to the end of a section and you'd feel like you kind of had an idea of what was happening. But then when you would get to the next chapter, or the next couple of chapters, you'd realize that that wasn't necessarily the case, which I enjoyed. So, and again, because it wasn't, it wasn't a romance per se, it wasn't, a horror, it wasn't any of those things. It was just kind of this historical fiction, and you follow this, mainly the one sister's life in Kansas, and all of that. But I did really enjoy the ending and the way that the story, was told and wrapped up at the end a lot. So I would definitely recommend it. It wasn't my favorite book, but that also might be kind of the genre in general. But I still enjoyed the story a lot. The next book that I read was The Tommyknockers by Stephen King. And so this book, it was good, and I did enjoy it. And this one, I mostly read it. I did listen to a little bit of it a few times, just when I was doing other things and needed, wanted to be able to keep going in the story. This book took me a lot longer to read, and I think part of it was because I don't want to give any spoilers, and I'm trying to really quick look at the flap, because I think that the flap information kind of alludes to it, but I don't want to say a whole lot. But basically, you're following this writer, Roberta Anderson, and she goes by Bobby, and she's got a really good friend, and now I can't remember what his name was, but Gardner is the last name. I don't remember his first name, but she has property, and she kicks something, and she realizes like there's buried metal, and she starts digging it up, and things start kind of happening. And for me, kind of what happened is the first part of the book was kind of interesting, but as I started to gather more and more of what was happening, I wasn't as invested in the story because, and I think it kind of gives you enough information that you might be able to figure it out just even from the flap. But she's basically digging up, or she thinks she's digging up like a spacecraft and stuff. And I won't say anything more than that. I don't think that's enough to really ruin or spoil anything in the book. But because it was like this UFO based and other stuff happening, that is not, I don't watch a lot of like science fiction. I don't even think I've ever really read anything that's technically sci-fi per se. But so it was really slow reading for me because I would read a chapter or two and then I'd be like, okay. And I would put it down and then I'd pick it back up, maybe the same day, but sometimes like, a day later. And so I was having a really hard time getting through it. And I think that's when I actually got the Audible version so that I could listen to more of it to get through this chunk that I was just having a really hard time with. And then when it got to the end, I found that the storyline, it kind of picked up for me a little bit better and I did enjoy it. But it's hard to figure out sometimes what I want to say without giving too much away. But the first part of the story just felt like it was very like long and drawn out and lots of details, like the things that I normally like in Stephen King's writing. And so like that part's fine. I'm not complaining about that. But it felt like at the very end of the book, like the last like 25%, that suddenly it just kind of rushed through and was like, okay, and then here's what happened and here's the end. So like we had all of this information and details and things leading up to a certain point. And so then it almost felt like if somebody was like, okay, we need to hurry this story up because it's gone on long enough and let's finish it. And then that's what happened. And so it wasn't my favorite. I'm glad I read it and it wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't do this one on, or did I? I don't think I talked about this one yet on like a blog. Maybe I did, but, or on a blog on a previous video, but I ended up rating this one like a 3.5 stars, something like that. And so that's why I said I would still recommend it, but just for me, it wasn't my favorite. And then the last book that I read in May was The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. And, this book, I will say, I absolutely loved. And this one I ended up giving a 5-star to, so I would highly, highly recommend this one. It was fantasy and some horror and some comedy, and just this felt more like what I had been hoping to read more of in May with the books that I got, especially the Stephen King ones. And I was so glad that this was the last one I read because it made the month feel better, because a couple of the books that I had read, I was very on the fence about and didn't care that much about. But this one I really loved. And so you are following this boy, Jack, and his mother, who is dying of cancer. And he meets someone, and basically, again, without saying a whole lot, and I think some of this is on the flap, but he discovers that there is basically another alternate world where people have what they call twinners, which would essentially be your counterpart in the other world. And so in our world, his mother is dying of cancer, and in this other world, his mom's twinner is the queen, and she is also dying, but nobody knows why. And so he goes on this epic adventure of trying to save his mother and the queen, which will also save this other world. And so there's a lot of things that happen with him, and that he finds out about himself and who he is, and why he's so important to both of the worlds, and his mother and all the things. And lots of stuff happens. There's definitely some people / creatures in here who some of them were shocking in a really good way, that made me really like them. Some of them were definitely creepy, but this book was just so fun to read. And I don't remember what it's called, but my understanding is there's actually a second book that goes along with this one. I think it's it might be like The Black House or something like that, also written by Stephen King and Peter Straub. And so this one is following Jack while he's young. And my understanding is the next book involves Jack when he's an adult. And I actually I was listening to a podcast, and I'd seen an article also that they are talking about possibly turning these books into a series, which if they do, I would be really stoked to see that, because if they're done well, I think it could be really good. Unfortunately, though, I know that Peter Straub passed away, but in the interview I listened to with Stephen King, I guess before he had died, Peter Straub had sent King an idea for a third book that would be Jack, as an older person, or an old man. I'm not sure, how old, but in his late years. And Stephen King also has his own ideas. And so he was talking about maybe he would try to finish the series and make it a full trilogy that would end up spanning Jack's entire life, from, young and middle age kind of to elderly. So we'll see. If that happened, I would be really excited. But I definitely want to try to find the next book in this so that I can read it, because I enjoyed this one so much. So this one I would definitely highly recommend. I think because it had that fantasy element to it too. I just really enjoyed that. I've been finding that lately, I don't know, again, maybe, I don't know if it's my age or what, but I found that I really love fantasies. And those were books that when I was younger, I had wanted to and I would try to read sometimes, but I could just never get into them. And then in the last 5 or 7 years or something like that, I've just found that I really enjoy fantasy novels a lot, especially when they span good long time frames, because I like being able to get into the story and feel like the characters. And so the Talisman really touched on those those needs for me, and kind of fit what I was looking for. So overall, March was not, or sorry, I keep wanting to say it was March last month, but April was not bad. I read just those 5 books. I might have read more, but again, Needful Things was so gory that after I read it, I didn't even pick up another book right away. And then The Tommyknockers was one that was just kind of slow for me, and I felt like it kind of dragged a little bit. And so that one took a long time to read. The Practice House was really good, but that was also a longer book. That one was over 500 pages, I think. And it was enjoyable, but again, it was, that historical fiction setting and, just kind of life things. And so it was good. I enjoyed the read, but it wasn't anything that kind of kept me enthralled the whole time. And then my other book was the Hell House one. And so that one was just little stories. So definitely my high point of the month was the Talisman. And I feel like I've got a lot of really good ones for May that I'm reading. And so far, I'm really enjoying what I've been reading at this point. So I'll have an update on that next week. But in the meantime, I hope that everyone has had a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.